Man Series, owner of Hall Man Publishing, and Frank Fiore. Frank, how are you? I know you're excited about our guest.
Yes, in fact, it's very interesting that he shot a film during COVID because I did the same thing. I shot a sizzle reel during COVID, and yes, very challenging trying to find the necessary sets and what have you, and getting permissions, and it was very difficult. And we're out there searching for places to shoot.
All right. So our guest today is Gina McCoy of Lumina, which will hit theaters on September 20th. Gino, thanks for stopping by. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Neil, Frank, and Paul for having me on the show.
All right.
Um,
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure.
All right. So how do you become a filmmaker? How did that from a musician to filmmaker, and how did you put that together?
Oh, crazy. I started working with Nick Blagona, at Metalwork Studios in Toronto, and Nick, he did like Deep Purple, Rush, Cat Stevens. He was like their engineer. He did a lot of road engineering for like the police, and yeah, I just worked on my first album with him, and we went to LA. Excuse me, and finished the album and stuff like that. And he said, "Well, you need to move out to LA, because of your talent and stuff. You're going to get exposure there." So I moved out. I started working with David Kirschenbaum. David, as you know, worked with Janet Jackson and Duran Duran, and a number of other people, Brian Adams, and yeah, sorry. And that was really my entrance into Hollywood, was like through the music industry. So when I got there, I was supposed to sign with a record label with Universal, and some of the other labels were interested in signing me. And but they wanted to change my music. They wanted to change my whole genre and everything else. And I didn't want to move away from live music because I wanted to do pop rock. My stuff was like more like, Lenny Kravitz, Michael Jackson, Police style. And I didn't want to like veer away from that and go into like Euro pop because Usher was doing that around that time. So I decided not to sign with the record label and go independent. So I had to figure out a way to get my music out there without the labels. So I decided to write a screenplay and write a script and put my music in a movie. And the first script I wrote was about the deep web and Bitcoin, and that was in 2010, 2011. And I was the first person in Hollywood to write about the deep web and Bitcoin, and I was circulated throughout all the top agencies and everything else. And yeah, that's how I got myself into screenwriting. I love Michael Mann and a number of other movies, so I read Heat was the first script I read, and I learned how to screenwrite from Heat, and that was it. My friend actually, my good friend Marty Schwartz was the first AD for Michael Mann on Miami Vice and stuff like that. So early on in my career, he taught me how to schedule and stuff like that. So I learned a lot of that stuff, and yeah, but sadly, my film went into development hell, and then I had to decide to write another. Decided to write another feature, and that's when I wrote Lumina.
Okay. Go, Frank, with your question.
Yeah, tell us about Lumina. You says it's a science fiction horror, but it's also has humor in it.
It's comedic. Um, it deals with serious topics. Um, about a guy who loses his girlfriend to alien abduction, and he goes in search for her with his friends. And yeah, I initially wrote the script as a
Ah,
comedy sci-fi,
that's
and I
cool.
infused horror into it. And you know, it deals with real topics because I worked in MUFON for a little bit, and they put me on to a lot of former Marines, Air Force, and stuff like that. A lot of guys in the military that had these experiences with UAPs and UFOs, and some of them experienced abductions. And these are normal guys, normal family. They have no mental issues and stuff like that. They're really good people, and they told me their experiences in the Navy and the Army. And I wanted to see what would be the psychological effect on someone if they lose someone close to the, or they lose someone to an abduction that's really close to them. So I also wanted to add some humor into it as well too, and everything else, to add a lighter touch to it. But a lot of these guys, they're like really, really ridiculed when they come out and actually share their story and everything else. So I wanted to, infuse a little bit of the serious topics in it, but keep it lighthearted at the same time and still entertaining.
Cool.
That's
Paul, question for Gina.
Uh, yeah, fascinating, Gino. Appreciate you being on today.
Thank you so much, Paul.
I'm seeing here that your your movie is like female driven from a different perspective. Yeah, I mean,
I won't say it's female driven, but I will say that Alex loses his girlfriend and he loves her and he goes in search of her. And I think that when we did the first audience testing in Los Angeles, Cannes, and Toronto, a lot of the female audience loved this sci-fi movie because there's an underlying love story to it. Because he goes in search of his girlfriend. He goes in search of the one he loved, and I think that's what drew a lot of women to watch the movie because normally a lot of the women I know in Hollywood that that are into movies, they're not really into sci-fi, so they don't watch sci-fi. So I think when I infuse that angle into it, like that kind of love triangle, or like the fact that he's going after his girlfriend to save his girlfriend, and how far would he go to do that? I think that really drew in the female audience to come and watch the film, and they appreciated it. And normally afterwards, even after my screen test in LA, some of my friends that are women in the industry that work for the studios, they said, you know what? Normally I wouldn't watch this type of movie, but I liked it. I really loved it because it had this in it. So I thought that was
All right.
really good to bring in a female audience to sci-fi.
So tell me about the cast, like Eric Roberts.
Eric. Eric was great. I first the first person I had cast for this role was Christopher Plummer. And Chris and I are really good friends. He was supposed to do the movie and then he got sick in 2020. And I was gonna fly out there with a crew, with a small splinter crew to shoot in Connecticut because he lives in Connecticut. And he said no, I mean, he's not too well. Afterwards, we're gonna do the next movie. Sadly, after I wrapped the movie, he passed away a week after I wrapped in 2021. But I had Chris on first. Um, John Voight wanted to do it, but didn't want to travel during COVID. Um, we also spoke to Nick Nolte. Nick Nolte also didn't want to travel during COVID. And then my casting director was like, "Oh, let's go out to Eric." I'm like, "Yeah, I like it." And Eric, he read it and he flew out and we sat and we talked for like an entire day about the role and how to approach it and everything else. And it was a great experience. Eric did an amazing job. I thought it was because the movie is really tongue in cheek and high camp as well too, with that comedic tone. So like, Eric played it really well in terms of like being that space cowboy kind of thing. He's like, government agent, and there's a lot of mystery to him. So like he really inhabited that role, and I thought he did an excellent job with it. The other characters we have are Ken Lawson from In the Cut, and the Parkers. We have a lot of upcoming actresses too, like Sydney Nicole Rogers, Andrea Tivadar, Eleanor Williams, and of course Emily Hall, who's really blowing up again into a lot of movies right now. She's really going her career's taking off. So I'm hoping, and Rupert Lazarus, of course, was the lead. So I tried to mix it up and have some upcoming actors as well. Um, we had some problems when we first started shooting the movie because they weren't the original cast. I had a original 5 members of the cast, and during pre-production, during COVID, they walked off.
Oh,
I
wow.
lost my entire cast during COVID, October 2020, in the height of everything in Morocco, and everyone was shocked. My DP, Larry Smith at the time, Larry Smith has worked with Stanley Kubrick. He's done a lot of big movies. He couldn't believe what happened. Everybody couldn't believe what happened. They walked off, they took the money, and they left. No reason. I had food poisoning. I came out of food poisoning basically just before we were supposed to start pre-production. And they left, and I had to recast the entire movie in a week and a half. And it was crazy. It was really crazy during COVID with the shutdowns, the curfews. Um, Larry Smith and my entire British camera team went to the UK for 5 days for Christmas, and they were coming back to shoot the rest of the movie. And the second wave of COVID happened, and they got locked down in London, and they couldn't fly back. So I shot the rest of the movie with my ACAM operator,
Oh, wow.
Raquel
Crazy.
Gallego. She worked on a lot of Marvel stuff.
You really worked hard, Gino, to get that done. Go ahead, Frank, with your question.
Yeah, you had a lot of contacts in Hollywood, well, with the actors and what have you. Did that evolve from your music experience, writing your music and doing your concerts, stuff like that? I mean, how did you get did your music career help you create relationships with these people?
It did, and it didn't. My first script, like I'm going back to it, that I wrote about the deep web of Bitcoin that I consulted with the FBI. I had an FBI consultant for my movie on my first one because my father's friends, he was a senior FBI and senior Homeland Security, and he put me onto the entertainment division of the FBI, and they consulted with me on my script because I was the first person to write about the deep web and the Bitcoin in Hollywood. And when that script went out to all the top agencies, like Sir Ben Kingsley, like John Travolta, Tyrese Gibson, Carrie-Anne Moss, like Jude Law, a lot of big A-list actors read the script and wanted to do the movie. Because it was the first time anyone had ever spoken about the deep web of Bitcoin. Even though House of Cards season 2, episode 2, they took a lot of the stuff I wrote about like 3 years afterwards, and they came out and said, "Oh, we're the first person to write about the deep web." That was a big lie. I was consulting with the FBI in 2010, 2011, and people wrote an article about me. And, despite that, they came out and said they were the first to talk about it. No, they weren't the first to talk about it. But that was my script, basically, that went out to Hollywood, and that drew a lot of talent. And that's how I met my second unit director, who's a good friend of mine, Dan Bradley, who works with Steven Spielberg, who did All Aboard. Tom Noble, my editor on this movie, who's an Academy Award-winning editor. He did Red and Witness. Yeah, I met all my DPs and my friend editors, everybody else through my first script that I wrote.
All right.
And
Wow.
that really got me, in touch with agents, in touch with Christopher Plummer and Ben Kingsley and all these other A-list actors, and the crews and everything else, because they saw how good I was, how good my writing was, and the fact that I was writing about topics that other people weren't talking about.
All right. So, Gino, best place we can check out the film and stuff. Where can we go?
It's in theaters, in select theaters, September 20th, which is in about 7 days, in a week. And after that, we're going to streaming about a month and a half from there, because we have a college and university tour of the movie in select theaters again in October. It releases November 1st in Canada. But it should be on streaming Amazon and Paraflix and a number of other networks after the theatrical release. But go and check it out in the movies, because in theaters, we're in Dolby Atmos, the sound, the color, the sound design, everything is great. So it's definitely a movie you need to go and check out in the theaters.
All right. Thanks again, Gino. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you so much, Neil, Paul, and Frank. Thank you so much.
All
God
right.
bless, guys. Take care.
That was
Thank
a
you for having
special
me.
simulcast